Welcome back, everybody, to These Aren't the Nerds You're Looking For. Lorenzo Phan sitting here with
Kevin Hord.
How you doing, man?
It's a wonderful day.
Daylight saving time's hit.
Yeah,
moving along.
That's not wonderful, but we've got no escape from this day. Part 1, right?
Yep, part 1 indeed. That's Star Wars Resistance we will be talking about today. On March 10th is the recording date here.
Release date, recording date, and then
all of it.
I guess you guys will hear this one tomorrow.
Yeah. So before we get into it, I'll just jump into our summary of the episode. As always, I will be summarizing the entire episode. So if you have not seen it, that is a spoiler alert for Star Wars Resistance No Escape Part 1. Ready?
Yes, sir. Ready.
All right. The episode starts with the Colossus still underwater. Pyre makes an announcement to the citizens, basically putting a curfew in effect on the citizens. We cut to Pyre in Captain Doza's office, who places Captain Doza under arrest. 4D, his Captain Doza's trusty little robot assistant, puts up a fight, but does in fact lose. We cut to Kaz, who wants to save Yeager and Tam, and then escape to Hosnian and Prime. Neeku wants to save all the citizens, and Kaz will inform his father, the senator, for help. But first, he wants to be able to save Yeager and Tam before anything else. We cut to Tierney, Agent Tierney, who is still hanging out with Tam. She shows Tam a recording of Yeager admitting resistance ties. Yeager is basically trying to convince the First Order that he is resistance, tried to recruit Kaz into it, and that Kaz had no part of anything. Tam is in slight denial, basically says that Yeager is just saying stuff to protect Kaz and is lying and stuff. Yeager would never do such things. We cut over to Tora Doza, who sends her little pet Buggles out to find Kaz. We then cut to Kaz, Neeku, Kel, and Isla, who make up a plan to take over the control station. Kaz will swim up to the tower, but as he starts to do that, he is stopped by two troopers. A little chase ensues. Neeku, Kel, and Isla, who are still in the control station, are helping him out best they can, and they do end up sucking out the stormtroopers into the water. And Kaz and CB-23 are able to be left behind. Let's see. We do cut back to Neeku, Isla, and Kel back in the control station, and at that moment they discover that there is a hyperdrive on board the Colossus. We then cut back to Kaz, who checks in on Flix and Orca and tries to see if there are any weapons there. Kaz discovers Flix and Orca hiding in a little crate. They have a little plan on how to be snuck off the Colossus, but being that they're underwater, the plan isn't quite going to plan.
Yeah, basically their plan is get in a box and mail themselves to
Orca's mother, I believe, right?
Flix's mother.
Yeah. So, but in any case, they're just like, take on a First Order. That's not happening, and then they shut themselves back in the box. At this moment, Buggles does find Kaz and CB-23. We get a little lassie moment, basically, where they're like, what is it, Buggles? You want us to follow you? So they do.
2 weeks in a row.
Yeah. At this moment, as Kaz starts to follow Buggles, Neeku and Kel come over to Kaz and mention that the station does have boosters and a Class 2 hyperdrive.
Mm-hmm.
The Colossus is both a ship and a station, and Kaz orders Neeku to try and find a way to fly it. Yeager and Tam cross paths as stormtroopers are taking Yeager to a cell, and Tierney is just hanging out with Tam. Tam is mad. Tam real mad. Yeager tries to explain his position, tries to tell Tam not to listen to the First Order. They're manipulating her, and that's what they do best. Yeager is then pushed into a cell that happens to be with Captain Doza. We get a scene where Kaz and Tora do reunite. Buggles does take Kaz back to Tora. Tora has a plan to break out Captain Doza. At this moment, they're hiding under the floor grates. First Order droid finds Kaz, and CB-23 fights it, throws it down a shaft. We cut back to Tierney talking to Tam. They're walking down another hallway, and Tierney offers Tam a position with the First Order. Basically, like, hey, if you join the First Order, we can actually make your dreams come true, and you've always wanted to be a pilot. We can make that happen. We get Kaz and Tora sneaking around, and they bump into a trooper. There's a little fight that happens, and Kaz stuns the trooper. They hide the trooper. Then they notice that there is a lack of other troopers around. It's very quiet. Kaz and Tora continue sneaking around, and they pass by a lot of troopers who are watching a transmission of General Hux announcing Starkiller Base is fully operational. Kaz and Tora continue to sneak, but then as the transmission continues, the Starkiller Base destroys a bunch of planets on a system. This is mirroring what we have seen in The Force Awakens. Cutting back to Kaz, he asks CB-23 what system that was that got destroyed, and it is in fact Hosnian Prime. Kaz has a little moment of emotional panic, considering that his father is a senator and would have been on the planet. So Kaz is without a father and without a home. And then is at this point that we cue darker fanfare, shall we say?
Yeah, it doesn't really hit the fanfare. Yeah,
it's definitely different music. It's not the same da 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 da. It's
like that does play, but it's usually that coincides with the logo as the logo pops up on screen, right? And both at the beginning of this episode and the end of the episode, the Resistance logo comes up to basically silence, and then at the end of the episode, you get the logo, and then it's like a cut to fanfare instead of the way that the episode normally ends, and then it goes to credits. And after that, everything is as it normally is. But I definitely noticed that as well. Did you pick it up at the beginning of the episode?
Yeah, it was definitely a different mood at the beginning of the episode for sure. Yeah. Just quick notes before we jump into our discussion on the episode itself.
Yeah.
This was directed by Stuart Lee and written by Brandon Auman, Auman. So that's how I'm going to pronounce it. Only casting notes I have are that Phil Lamar plays a Stormtrooper number 1, and Steve Blum plays a Stormtrooper number 2. And Domhnall Gleeson does, in fact, play General Hux, though we can discuss that. I think they just lifted Force Awakens.
We'll talk about that.
Soundtrack and
we'll talk about that.
Cool. But yeah, Phil Lamar and Steve Blum, they're Star Wars animation regulars, I would say, right?
Yeah.
So that was fun to notice, and I'm now noticing in my notes here. I just wrote Stormtrooper. That's missing a couple letters there, but so those were the big casting notes that I noticed here.
Yeah, I had those as well, and then as far as the credits go, Tora Doza is listed like 4th to last on this credits list, and I thought that was interesting. I was gonna see if you had any insight into why she would be so far down, because it's like the main cast, and then it is like we get Flix and Orca in there, and then we do get kind of the guest stars of I don't even know if you call them the guest stars, but recurring voice actors that we've seen and heard before. And then near the bottom was Tora's credit.
Unless it's like alphabetical order, which I don't think I've noticed. Yeah. It's always some sort of weird, like, there's a lot of negotiation that goes into credits order. Right. I think we've had this discussion where
we have
Oscar Isaac always gets a separate page for his.
Yes,
he always gets he always gets an and Oscar Isaacs as Poe Dameron credit page on his own.
Right.
So, that's something that usually comes down to agent negotiations of some sort. So it's the details of how that works is very elaborate and confusing, and it's never the same twice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just outside information. Like I'm currently reading a book called Disney War by James Stewart. He has an initial somewhere so he's not, you know, the actor James Stewart, but he's a journalist. James Stewart. But it's all about Michael Eisner's tenure at Disney, and I don't know how he gets it, but the author has a lot of he basically lays out in dialogue a lot of various meetings that they have, and one of the last ones I just heard was like negotiations between Hilary Duff's mother and various executives at Disney, and
interesting
how the reason like there isn't a Lizzie McGuire movie sequel because like the mother was just difficult to work with, and they'd rather let that deal die than give the mother what she wants, right?
Man, it's good that Edward Norton was not her dad.
Oh man,
that could have been extra terrible for her.
But yeah. So you know, there are good case scenarios, there are bad case scenarios, and you know, it's just one of those things that us lay folk will never really be privy to.
Yeah, I found it odd because Tora's character is more prevalent in this episode than in probably most of the series.
Definitely.
And then she's like all the way down at the bottom. So I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
It's worth a note.
And it's probably one of those things too that can kind of maybe be somewhat consistent throughout the series as a whole, where they just kind of negotiate once and move on with life, right? You know,
fair enough.
Like I don't think there's like an episode by episode like, well, like she's more important this one, move her up, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it can potentially just be a one and done situation.
Fair enough.
Yep.
So let's hop into this thing. I wanted to talk about Major Von Reg's non-cameo in this, where in the establishing shot at the very beginning of the episode, we see some ties flying around, and Von Reg's there on patrol.
But not.
But that's it. And I think this is my confusion and my problem with all of these 4 or 5 characters that really are essentially like one person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why? I don't know. I guess why? You know, why make sure that you've got Von Reg's tie advanced in the opening shot of the episode, and then he's nowhere to be seen for the entire episode. Like you don't even see him walk by in a background.
Nope.
Other than that, it's just 2 seconds of a red TIE Advanced flying across the screen with a couple other TIE fighters, and that's it.
Yeah, he's just there. And we've had this discussion where like none of these characters are truly important in their own right, or at least I would say that.
Right.
You know, and the fact that like the episode continues on and Von Reg isn't a missed presence, right, says a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so really it's one of those issues that I don't know we'll solve here, and the show won't solve for us either.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know. Do you expect to see Von Reg next week? Like
no.
before the close of season 1?
No. Like if we do, great. If we don't, I'm sure the story will carry on, and again, he won't be a missed presence because Pyre is the only one really that has like left any sort of impact on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there is a character that I would like to have continue on and like they could kill off all the others, you know, Pyre is the survivor I would want out of all of this. Like Von Reg, he's there, you know. Tyranny, she's
Von
fresh.
Reg is
like,
cool
I got
because
nothing.
he's red, but other than that, he could be anyone.
Right. He could have just been like a named stormtrooper, even, you know, that wasn't red, right?
Right.
You know, so like a reoccurring stormtrooper, great, but they made him stand out because he's red. Cool.
Yep.
You know,
pretty much.
But beyond that, yeah, like Pyre for sure is the only one that like I have any sort of sympathies towards as like just a character on the show.
Any like emotional attachment to, right?
Right. Yeah.
My next note is about Doza's confrontation with Pyre. And the datapad that he, tries to basically, hey, I got this info, like, throw it in Pyre's face. And he's like, this is unwarranted, unasked for, unacceptable, and most likely illegal. So what it says in Arabesh, this is it's just a list, right? So it's essentially, it says, like, citizen, and then, like, each citizen has a number, which these numbers are fucking long. They're like 10 digits long. So I wasn't worried about what those actual digits were, right? And then the second column, either there's basically two outcomes. It's either deported or arrested.
Yeah.
So all of the disappeared would be marked under deported. So I guess if you want to go and find out what Aunt Z's number is, it's probably narrowed down to 2 or 3 different citizen numbers on this datapad. More power to you. I'm not going to take the time to do it. And then basically everybody else is just like detained and arrested. So that is the info that Doza brings to Pyre. Where it came from, I don't really know. But then there's like a weird bar graph on the bottom. I don't know if you paused and looked at this at all.
Not at all.
There's a bar graph. Basically, I think what it's supposed to depict is like the number of people that were detained or arrested as opposed to those that weren't. And like the red section of the bar graph is a lot bigger than the blue section. So I'm thinking that essentially this is supposed to show you that most people have been detained and or arrested or deported, right? It's a weird bit of information. Like, I don't necessarily feel like Star Wars Resistance is doing a great job with, like, this stuff. And I know it's only nerds like me that are going to look in and see what these things say, right? There's datapads on the Clone Wars that have info on them. And sometimes, screens in the background and stuff. And I feel like there's a little bit more attention to detail in the Clone Wars, in the stuff that doesn't really matter. It could just be computer gibberish, but somebody took the time to do something with it. And there's just less attention to detail in Star Wars Resistance. That's all I have to say about that. And
I wonder if it comes... Do we know who was in charge of animation for Clone Wars? That was in-house, right? Because this animation is doled out to a separate company, I believe.
Yeah, but I would imagine that there's still like a standard of like this needs to be here and this needs to be there, right? It's not just like a free for all. Maybe these sorts of details, like they're like, hey, this is like the language that you need to use, sort of thing. But like somebody just gives you like the key animations, but doesn't fill in this data pad per se, right? Yeah, I'm just thinking, like I'm thinking back to last week when Tierney was talking to Tam, and she was like, "Oh, check Kazuda's service record."
Yeah,
and it was basically like name, who his dad is, where he's from. He's a pilot. That's it.
Yeah,
like it's just lacking.
Yeah,
but it looks cool. When you're not able to read Arabesh, it looks cool because they can throw it up on screen. It looks like there's a bunch of information there, and I think we've probably already spent far too much time discussing this, but shit like that stands out to me,
Yeah. Whereas to me, it happened and I moved on with it.
Yep.
So. Yeah.
What do you think about Kaz's plan to, his plan of attack now that they have sunk the Colossus? His plan is essentially go get Tam and Yeager, steal a ship, go to his dad's house.
Like, it makes sense considering that his father is a man of power to some degree. We don't know to what extent, but he is a senator, right? And we are aware that he does come from wealth. So it makes sense to me to try and at least, I think the idea of bringing attention on the problem is good, right? Whether or not that's exactly what Kazuda / the writers are intending
Right.
by this line of logic. I am not sure.
Okay.
But I at least agree that the idea of bringing it to a senator, father or not, is a good step. Like, hey, there's a system out here. The First Order is occupying it.
Okay.
They're oppressing people. They're sending people off-world that disagree. Like, that's bad.
Right.
Right. So,
Okay.
I think it's a fine plan, and it's worthy of him to still want to rescue his friends first rather than leave them to go do that other step, right?
Yeah. I totally agree with you there. Kazuda is definitely being admirable here still, with the fact that he's like, I think he feels guilty that Tam is incarcerated, even though she's not, right? Because the next scene that we get is Tam and Tierney, and if anything, Tam is being pampered. She's got like a steak dinner. They're hanging out. There's like some nice relaxing music. They're just chilling and talking. It's like that scene in The Matrix. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie, so I don't remember any characters' names, right?
Where Agent Smith is talking to the Judas character, basically.
Yeah.
What was his name? I don't recall.
I don't remember.
But he was played by Joey Pantoliano. I remember that.
Yeah.
Joey Pants?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's talking to Joey Pants, and like this is the same thing.
Yeah.
The only difference is that, that was a simulation and Joey Pants knew it, and here it's reality, but Cypher. There you go. Cypher's eating some steak there, Tam's eating some steak here, and she's all, I don't remember the last time I had a meal this good, and that it does mirror kind of point for point,
Definitely.
I guess the difference is that Cypher was going to do some treacherous backstabbing and, sell his friends out, and Tam is
at the very least, Cypher knew what he was doing. Mm-hmm. He was aware of it the whole time.
He was selling out his friends, whereas here Tam is being sold by the First Order.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is where I will. I agree with your analogy, but I react differently to the characters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So, like, Cypher is a bad guy, for sure, whereas Tam, in not realizing she's talking to the bad guys, annoys me.
She still doesn't get it, man.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
It's super annoying to me here, especially when she sees Yeager in handcuffs being paraded around by the First Order stormtroopers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would think that it goes back to that one line where Kel and Isla talk to her, where they're like, hey, these are friends you've known for like years, right? Like, why don't you believe them?
Right.
So Yeager's in handcuffs, breaks not free from the handcuffs for a second, but fights the stormtroopers to tell Tam, like, hey, you're being manipulated. This is what they do. Don't believe their lies, right? And Tam is like, well, you lied to me.
Yeah, she's basically like, shame on you.
Right.
Shame, shame, shame. I'm not listening.
Right. I'm like, yo, like, you can see Yeager has, like, true emotions here, whereas, like, Tierney is, like, cold and calculated the whole time. It's like, hey, we can give you what you want. Like, isn't that like a red flag right there? Like, here's everything you've wanted. We'll get you your own ship, and you'll fly and, run missions. And like,
do you think that happens, or do you think she's going to come around next week? We only got one more of these things before the end of season 1.
No, Tam's going to turn. Tam will fly away with Tierney. Like, at some point next week, like, there will not be a reunion. Kaz will show up. Kaz and Tam will get in another fight, which will sound pretty much exactly the same as we've been hearing the last handful of weeks ever since the First Order occupation started. It'll be more heated,
Do you feel that there is an opportunity to end season 1 on a cliffhanger? Like, that we're not going to resolve this. So, okay. I agree. And instead of waiting until the end, I'm going to jump straight into predictions for next week and beyond. The end of the episode is going to coincide with the destruction of Starkiller Base. Okay, that's going to be the end of season 1. In the meantime, Kaz is still going to be on this mission to try to rescue Tam, right? He's going to get to her, and she's essentially going to say, no thanks.
Yeah, I agree.
I've chosen my side, and she'll leave with Tierney.
Yep.
And I wouldn't be surprised if she is outfitted in some sort of armor similar to what Tierney's wearing.
Yep.
And they can essentially walk off together, leaving Tam, and then leaving Kaz, rather. I don't know if it's just going to end there, and then we have to wait till season 2 to see what happens to Kaz, because you would assume that he was caught at that point. Especially with No Escape 1, No Escape 2. Maybe there really is no escape for him. But that's what I'm calling for next week. That's the way I'm calling the end of the season to turn out.
I basically agree with you completely there. We'll get a few scenes of Kaz dealing emotionally with the apparent death of his family and home, right? And I think Tora will step up in this regard, as will Neeku and Kel and Isla, in giving him emotional support here, right?
Okay.
We'll get some sort of showdown with Pyre, and Yeager will be freed or die.
Who's going to be in the showdown with Pyre? Because we already had a Doza Pyre standoff this episode.
Yeah, it's going to be like a Kaz and crew showdown with Pyre.
Okay.
But Kaz will be leading it for sure.
Yeager be there?
I think so.
Okay.
So Yeager will be there in some degree, or it will be in the midst of a Yeager rescue.
Okay.
So
I'm okay with that.
That's kind of my predictions. We'll see how close we get next week.
Yeah.
And now that we've said it, likely none of this will happen at all.
I agree with you, because I have been there's been a couple of times where I know this is gonna fucking happen, and I'm affirming it, mark the tape. Yeah. This is what's going down, and then I'm completely
and then they fly
wrong.
off some other planet. They're doing some other random shit.
Or it's just inconsequential. It's somebody walked down the hall and farted, and they kept on going. Nobody cared.
Yeah. Here's my other thing with this series. So as we're kind of nearing the end of the series, this is clearly not a series wrap up, which likely next week we'll have to do a season 1 wrap up. We'll judge the episode, but maybe talk about the season as a whole. But as a light review leading into that. There has been so much information planted throughout this series, and I do not see all of it coming back up next episode, right? None of it came up this episode, so there's only one left. But the symbol that was on Kel's bracelet that we saw on the temple of that faraway planet with Poe and Kaz.
Yeah.
Planted information that never came back up. Even other simple things we got a mention of Doza being in the Imperial Army.
Yep.
But that was discovered by Kaz in the form of an outfit. So Kaz has this information, but it's never been brought up from Kaz ever again, per se. And I do not imagine it coming back up next week.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say to that. I feel like the rest of my notes for this episode are kind of like a who cares thing, since we've broached the what's going to happen next week.
Right.
I had a couple of details that I thought were interesting, like these underwater clone troopers, the fight between Kaz and the troopers underwater. This water doesn't seem to react the same way that like liquid H2O does on planet Earth, where human beings seem to have their own buoyancy in the water. Same with BB-8. Like, they jump in and they only sink like deep enough where they're in the water, and then they're just stationary. Like, you don't have to tread water. You're not floating. You're not sinking. You are where you are.
Yep.
These underwater,
it's basically full 0G underwater.
Basically, yeah. It doesn't slow down like punches and stuff like that.
Yeah. There's no resistance for fighting in the water, which is weird.
No resistance in resistance.
Yeah. Also, what's weird is that I'm curious about CB-23's propulsion abilities as Kaz is hanging on. And Kaz is
we
like,
talked about
go
that
faster.
last week. And yeah.
And it pops back up again here. So it's weird to me that either CB-23 is slow or the troopers are fast in their swimming abilities. You know, because they catch up real fast, and they got their flippers on, and they're just flipping right behind them. They're just kicking the water.
These troopers in general, like, you can see that they still have their regular trooper helmet on, and then there's like a thing that's over that,
mm-hmm.
and then they have like wetsuits on. I don't know. It's weird. Like,
it's a weird look.
I feel like they should just be underwater with like a backpack.
Yeah, because
that's it. I think that's all they need.
If
they have
Clone
fins
Wars,
and flippers and shit.
If in Clone Wars we know that they have suits that can withstand the vacuum of space,
right?
Theoretically, those suits could just be transferred to underwater,
right?
And yeah, like at most, the other cosmetic changes, flippers would make sense to me, right? Okay. But yeah, the idea of an external apparatus on top of their external helmets, was weird, just unnecessary. Yeah, like just the normal stormtrooper suit that we can see is airtight to some degree, with like an air pack of some sort. All I needed.
This is like wearing a raincoat, but then you're like, oh, I'm gonna go swimming in my raincoat, so I gotta wear like a wetsuit over my raincoat. But it's gonna be like form fitting to my coat, not myself.
Right.
It's weird.
None of this was necessary. Also, like, what were they patrolling for in actuality? And why was there only 2 of them?
I'm not really sure, because they say something like, Sector Z or Sector 60 is clear. Right. So maybe they're looking for just that. They know that somebody snuck outside with Yeager to send this transmission last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're looking for where that breach occurred. It's like a security perimeter sweep. Unfortunately, this is underwater.
But why just 2 of them? Like,
well, I think we probably just see 2 of them. There's probably more of them.
Sector?
Yeah. Like, these guys were just in this section, and that happens to be where Kaz went. There's other underwater troopers out there.
Yeah, because we get like a few like wide shots of the Colossus underwater, but we only see other fish.
We do. Around. We see some really badass bioluminescent sharks or something.
Yeah,
like multiple times.
Yeah,
and all I could think every time I saw them was like, those things are fucking cool. I wish I could catch one and put it in a tank in my house.
Which is fun. Like, what I was thinking was, I was really hoping during the chase sequence underwater.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, there's got to be a bigger fish coming somewhere, right? It's got to be a bigger fish.
There's always a bigger fish.
There's always a bigger fish. Where's the bigger fish? And no bigger fish.
So. Yeah. Bigger fish it is.
Yeah.
So, somewhere along the line, Kaz, like, stuns a trooper. There's a lot of stormtroopers that get knocked out. And never once does Kaz put the armor on so that he could just walk around the station.
Right. That's what I thought this was going.
Like, he's already done that. He was the new trooper in The New Trooper, right? But for some reason, he doesn't use that same approach this time. Is that just because...
I think maybe it's because he has Torah and CB-23 with him. It would just be weird to try and... Like, would he be sneaking around alone, you know? Or...
No, I think he would be sneaking around with Torah, and if they get caught, then he's like...
I have a prisoner.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
But again, I think it's a better idea to just continually sneak stealthily rather than out in the open with Torah in the open.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like, I think their approach to sneaking and remaining hidden is a wiser plan than just walking around in the open with a stormtrooper outfit, and then if somebody stops them, it's like, well, this is a prison. Like, no, just hide.
Couldn't they both put trooper armor on?
Well, they only have the one. They only have the one, you know.
Well, no, because earlier, like the Shellfolk guy, the Ninja Turtle knocks on the door.
Oh, right.
And they clear out, I don't know, 3 or 4 troopers there. I want to see Neeku in some stormtrooper armor.
But Torah never gets back to that sector.
That is true. So Kaz could have already had it on by then, and then they knock another dude out, and she could have put some on. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but again, like the idea of walking around with a CB unit, and then they still have to explain the CB unit, you know. It's just a better idea in this case, I think, to just remain hidden rather than like awkwardly like, how's the sector going? Like, have you reported to blah blah blah? Like, that's exactly what happened in The New Trooper, right? Like, he kind of kept like getting caught in these little corners. So
basically, it's a storyline that's already been told, and they don't need to redo it.
Basically, yeah. And it clearly didn't work at that point, so it's not going to work here.
Fair enough. I did like the comment that that Tam says to Tierney when Tierney's like, "Are you sure you don't know where Kaz is?" And she says, "I don't know. As far as I know, he could have left like hours ago." Like, apparently Kaz pretends to be dumb, but when it comes down to it, he's really not. Like, he knows what he's doing. Because I really felt like that was kind of the way that we have seen Kaz as a character. Especially in recent weeks where we're continuing to question like his behavior at the beginning of the series. Like, he should be smarter than that. Unfortunately, I don't think that he was like just pretending to Forrest Gump his way around through the first 8 episodes of the show or whatever, right? But it is interesting that another character like sees him like that, because if he's able to trick her and actually be a spy working day to day with these people, like that's the way that Tam sees it sees him, is that you know, his whole thing is a ruse.
Yeah, it's a curious point that she brings up. Like I said, right now I don't have any faith that her character will make any right decisions in the next final 22 minutes of screen time we're gonna have with all these characters.
Man, it's gonna be tough. I feel like there's so much stuff that needs to be addressed in next week's episode. We have speculated a bunch. While I was deciding what was going to happen next week, I had totally forgotten that the platform is a ship.
Right.
So, are they going to leave the planet?
I guess.
Maybe.
Yeah, like the idea of any or all of this potentially happening in 22 minutes sounds nuts. You know, but yeah, I kind of forgot about that hyperdrive already. Which is really sad because it is such a big point. So Kaz will probably try and help Yeager fight Pyre. Neeku, Kel, and Isla will be down below with the Shell folk trying to figure out how to blast off, maybe.
I bet you the Shell folk know how to do it, and all Neeku has to do is ask them.
Right. Yeah.
They're like the ancient knowledge of this
platform.
Fueling platform, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, I think it's kind of like if you need to know what's going on, you go down and you talk to the shell folk.
Yeah.
That's kind of been established. So,
but again, like the idea that this platform is also a ship is so weird. It's such a weird extra development.
I thought it was pretty cool. Like when that happened, I was like, of course it is. Like, why would it not be? It totally fucking makes sense. What they're gonna do with it, I don't know. That's an extra wrench in the works that I didn't expect to have to deal with when deciding what was gonna happen next week. You know, but maybe what it is.
I think they'll go to Takodana, though. Takodana is the only other planet that's been mentioned besides Hosnian Prime.
Man, are they gonna land on that lake?
Yeah, just smash right in there.
Like, well, in that case, they're gonna get there like directly after Maz's castle is destroyed, and then early in season 2, instead of having Oscar Isaac, we're gonna have Lupita Nyong'o with Maz in this show. And if that happens, I'm gonna just go ahead and give all of season 2 a thumbs up now.
I'm all for Lupita Nyong'o being in this show, so I'm all for it.
Absolutely, man. And then, so then we're getting way far in the future, but so then season 2 is gonna end with Maz going to do, you know, like, so in season 1 we had Poe Dameron like, oh yeah, tomorrow I gotta go to Jakku, and then next season it's just gonna be Maz like, hey, I gotta go do this thing, and like that's where she's going when she's in that video Skype call with Poe and Finn and Rose.
She's in the battle. Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
Or
even better, that shit happens on the show and she is actually with Kaz.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like that'd be really cool if she's actually fighting in some random battle with Kaz. So
they're weaving this series pretty tightly with the sequel trilogy. So which reminds me, the last set of notes I had were all about the transmission that they overhear.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Which is General Hux talking about Starkiller Base.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided that I was going to pull up that scene, right, in The Force Awakens, and I nailed it on first try where I had, like, whatever the first line that Hux says, like, I paused on Resistance, and then I pulled up, half a minute earlier or something on The Force Awakens, and then when he says that, like, I hit play on the other one, and they are synced exactly for the first 2/3 of that speech, and then The Force Awakens kind of, there's a little bit of the timing is a little bit off, like in between each statement that General Hux is giving, so it's a little bit compressed in Star Wars Resistance, but it's word for word. The dialogue is exactly the same. The events that happen are exactly the same. The sequence is the same. The timing is just slightly different.
Yeah. And it makes sense. You're trying to compress for time on a 22-minute show.
And really, by the time, like throughout that speech, we're talking about maybe like a second, and that would be it.
Yeah.
Now the firing of the weapon, because there's more like trooper celebration in The Force Awakens, so that extends it a little bit, and then the actual attack where the weapon charges up and fires, and there's more to it in The Force Awakens, but it's all there, man. And you had said something earlier during your wrap up about whether or not this is, did they bring Domhnall Gleeson back? They didn't. It's
definitely just a importing of audio.
Yep.
Yeah. I could tell that just even listening to it. I'm like, yep, that's definitely just the audio from the movie.
I was pretty sure it was, but it is.
Yeah, it is.
How many times did you watch this one?
Twice. I watched it twice.
Okay. And that's kind of been your standard for 4 Stars Resistance?
Not always, but lately I've been doing that more often. I've been watching it once, not taking notes, just watching the episode fresh as is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Pure run through, and then I stop it, immediately go back, and then do my summation notes.
Yeah, I've been about a twofer on these, and this one was definitely a threefer. So I saw it once, and then I was like, okay, I gotta watch this again before I do notes. And then I watched it solid, like straight through a second time, and then a third for the notes pass. So why don't we move into thumbs up, thumbs down, one word review, and kind of closing thoughts, if you will. And if you want me to go first, I'll totally go first.
Go for it, yeah.
Okay, so this one gets a thumbs up from me, but I almost wanted to like not judge it because I'm gonna throw my one word review out there, and it's incomplete. Like this is half of an episode, and I feel like the start of the season was the recruit, which was instead of like a 22-minute, it was like 48-minute or whatever, right? I think they should have closed the season out like that.
Right.
I don't really know why they broke this into No Escape Part 1, No Escape Part 2. Because it's definitely like we have some setup, things are going, Kaz starts moving through what he needs to do, gets some information, cut to commercial, never come back. Like, I'm not even going to call this a cliffhanger because that's not really what it feels like. It's just the first part of a story.
I don't disagree. I'm also going to give this a thumbs up. But I agree with you. I'm kind of a middle of the road guy regarding the ending here, where the show has done it before, where they try and do cliffhangers, and that's fine. Like, the episode still feels complete to me. The episode here still feels complete as an episode per se. I agree the story is not complete, right?
Okay,
but television's a little bit different, where as long as there's progression, there's some sort of achievement that happens per se. Like there's a good number of things that are revealed here. The ship is a hyperdrive. Tam kind of gets coerced a little bit here. If the show had operated like this from the beginning, there are shows that do that. We've discussed this, I think, before, where a show like completely different genre, different age audience target here.
Okay.
But like True Blood is a show that every episode ends with like that crazy fucking cliffhanger. And the way Alan Ball, the producer of that show, described it was the books that television series, each chapter ends like that, right? So each chapter has like a one line right at the end where you're like, what the fuck? And then you have to read the next one. That's what each episode feels like. So like each episode still like has its own little arc and stuff like that. But man, there were some cliffhangers where I remember watching it with, my girlfriend at the time, and we just be sitting there like, okay, what the fuck? And then like for like 3 minutes we're just like reeling, right? That's definitely not exactly. Yeah, that's definitely not what's happening here, but I feel like this moment in this episode could have just felt more natural, more part of the series as a whole if we had been operating on this level the whole time. So think back to also like the way that episode where we lead into Pyre arresting Yeager, Kaz, and the rest of the crew, right? Like I still feel like that episode was complete, Then we get that one little moment where you're like, oh shit.
I agree, but that's kind of what I feel is lacking. Like if this episode is intended to be left on a cliffhanger, the cliffhanger is how is Kazuda Xiono going to respond to the fact that his home planet and his family are gone. Like, yes, he does have one line of dialogue that says, I have no family, I have no home, right?
Yeah.
But it's, like I
personally,
said, this to me, it feels like this stuff happened, we go to commercial, and then we have unfortunately we have a week-long commercial because there's a bunch of other shit, and we'll get back to it next week. It doesn't feel cliffhangery to me. It just feels like this was a good stopping point.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, cliffhangers to me don't have to be insane reveals. Like, to me, this is just like a new piece of information that's left open right at the end. Does that make sense? Like, so I see this all like, yeah, the way Alan Ball considered like the chapter changes, right? You know, it's just different because like a chapter can be as long as you want in a book. You can write whatever you want because you're only limited by the words that you can write, right? Here we are constrained by time. There's a time limit.
I agree.
But that said, yeah, I don't think this is supposed to be like a mind-blowing like revelation sort of thing. But I do like the last moment of I like that reveal. I like the reveal right at the end that it's Hosnian Prime that blows up. I really did like that moment of seeing Kaz vulnerable, even if for a moment. I didn't mind that it ended there, personally. Like, to me, it was a good rising action that, as you described, jumps into commercial that will last a week. That, to me, is fine.
Okay. Yeah. I guess my last note on this is that when I think of like cliffhanger, especially in like literature, okay, that is when, for me, like you finish a chapter and however the chapter ends, you're like, I need to know what's going on next. Like, I need to read what's next. Like this is more like I'm interested.
Yeah.
But I can definitely close the book for a while, go to sleep. Right. Like, it's not pushing me that extra step.
I agree with you, yeah. So that's why I'm saying, like, in reading it in that regard, that's why this doesn't bother me. Like, I don't need this to be like a what the fuck happens next. Like, you know, like, we know what happens in Force Awakens, you know, like, so with the larger story at hand, there's no pressing need for me to try and figure it out. What I am in for now, thanks to the last 10 seconds of this episode, I am connecting with Kazuda. I am connecting with his emotional plight here. You know?
Okay.
It's not a cliffhanger that I need answered. It's just more of a, I like that we have gotten to this point.
Fair enough.
Right. Considering where we were with Kaz at the beginning of the show, stuff like that. That said,
I was about to say this is about the most positive that you've been as far
for
as
Kaz, for sure. Yeah.
Overall,
like,
on an episode.
Like, for those last few seconds to me, like I did have problems with the rest of the episode. We've discussed some of them. The underwater shit is really weird. Like in my notes, you know, in the summation, there were the action scenes played out very long, and I think that was completely unnecessary, and we got a lot of back and forth that was kind of weird. You know, the fight between two droids was fine, but you know, on the whole, the episode was enjoyable. I will say I am, with this episode in particular, I am still very negative on Neeku. He still annoyed me to some degree.
Yeah. He's got the same problems that he had last episode. So
yep, definitely. Yeah, so I don't need to make a big deal about it.
Are, you know, if you want to hear us talk about Neeku not necessarily in a positive light, check out Descent from last week, because
he's just doing the same again. Yeah, he's doing the same thing.
Usually I love Neeku as a character, and he slid off the map last week for me, and he's in the same place. Yep.
And then the other big thing is, if Tam dies next week, I'll be happy.
That's pretty harsh, man.
If I will be happy personally. I will say she needs to die. I just don't care. Do not care.
Yeah, don't care is kind of where I'm at there. Like, she's
Yeah.
turned into a character that I'm like, okay, I don't get it. I don't understand.
Like, if she goes to the First Order,
Mm.
I don't need a redemption story. I don't need her redeemed. I don't need her coming back. You know, like, I don't need a scene of, like, I'm sorry, Kaz, I was wrong. No, I don't care. Die, fall off the side of the Colossus, drown, whatever. Get eaten
if
by
she goes to the First Order, I want her designation to be somebody that we know gets blown the fuck up at the beginning of The Last Jedi. That's what I want. Like, you know, it's like, congratulations, Tam, you're gonna be a pilot. You're fucking TIE Fighter pilot 136, and then, you know, like, the only, you know what I'm saying? Like, if there was a pilot that was named in the beginning of The Last Jedi, like, I want it to be her. So she's like, yes, I achieved my dreams, and boom.
No. What needs to happen is that if she becomes a pilot, we need a pilot showdown between her and Kaz. Kaz is the better pilot based on what we saw at the beginning of the whole fucking series, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Kaz shoots her down right out of the sky. So,
I'm down with that too.
Yeah, like, fuck you. I've always been a better pilot. This is why I get to fly the fireball. Fuck you, and shoots her down. But yeah,
do you got a one-word review of? Okay.
Ooh.
What you got this week?
I don't know, actually.
One word, sum it up. You called it enjoyable, but that's what you used last week.
Yeah. Yeah, like, this one, it wasn't, like, fully, as, like, last week was enjoyable. Like, I wouldn't put that to apply to this whole episode. I don't know. Yeah, I got nothing on this one, honestly. Like, I was trying to think about it, but no. There's a reason we're doing a 1-hour podcast. I can't. So.
You can do it.
No.
All right. I'm going to go back and listen to this one. I'm just going to pick some word that you used in adjective type fashion and plug that one in. But
anyways, so moving on, we'll just move on. So
I was going to say, speaking of plugs, what do we got?
So, next week we got No Escape Part 2. That will be the season finale of Star Wars Resistance, as far as we know it.
Yes, sir.
So that is what we got coming up next week. Closing out this episode, we always want to thank Lindsay, strangefantasymusic@gmail.com. She put together the jingle at the beginning and end of every episode. Also, Kevin Warren, at They Call Me K-Dub on Twitter. He's the guy who drew up the cover art that you see on iTunes and places like that. If you want to reach out to us, that's Kevin Lorenzo here. NotTheNerdsPodcast@gmail.com. This is how to reach us that way. Also, at Not The Nerds on Twitter, at Not The Nerds Podcast on Facebook. We are available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Audio is also available on YouTube. So anywhere you listen to us, give us a like, listen, subscribe, please. Anything else?
Mm-hmm. Tell your friends, tell your parents, tell, whoever.
Yep.
But so we thank you guys for listening also. So that's all I got for this week. So unless you got anything else.
Nope. Until next week, these aren't the nerds you're looking for.
Adios.